Welcome to the Personal Trainer Hustle. Personal Trainer Hustle. If you didn't know, you do now.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Personal Trainer Hustle. And today we are talking about your dynamic with your clients or even potential clients. So this applies more to the clients that you work with. That's kind of the spirit in which I put today's episode together. But this is just as important when you are also in the process of signing someone up. So this rule applies pretty much to any session that you are having, any interaction that you're having with someone. But this is inspired based on something that I've noticed, and that is that relating to people and building relationships with people of different kinds sometimes is a little bit difficult for a lot of people, right? One of the unspoken parts, right? Unspoken jobs of a personal trainer is also carrying conversations with people that are of all different backgrounds, all different, you know, um, experiences in the world. And it's difficult sometimes, depending on where you come from as a trainer. It's difficult sometimes to find something in common with different people, right? You know, if you're a younger person, sometimes it's harder to connect with an older person, or the reverse of that is also true. Sometimes we're into sports and our clients are into watching shows, right? And so it's hard sometimes. I think for a lot of trainers, this episode is super important because we need to have better strategies in connecting with individuals, right? We're not going to be able to find something in common with every person that we meet. And so having some tools to be able to connect with those people a little bit better, at least to manage to have some type of relationship or a positive relationship with them, is very important. And so today we're going to talk about just three things that I want you to think about and hopefully start to apply in your sessions to make those relationships a little bit better, a little bit deeper, especially when we don't know how to connect or when we don't have something in common with that individual. That is just part of the job. And I just thought about this as I was talking with one of the trainers at the gym. Hey, you know, it's hard. You have to be well versed in order to connect with more people. And you know, I'll add this to today's point. You have to really consider this because even if your training is good and even if your sales are good, if your connection with them, if your conversations with them during the training session are not good enough, this can also be one of those pitfalls. It could also be one of those areas in which we may be losing clients. Maybe not all of them because you get along with some, but you may be losing some clients because you're not finding anything in common. You're not finding a way to connect. Your conversations may not be what you want them to be. And I'll start with this topic. You know, you have to be careful that you don't go in believing that as long as you are friendly, as long as you are fun, as long as you have a lot to talk about, that somehow you're connecting with the individual. So think about this. Just because you as a trainer talk a lot doesn't mean that you're connecting with that person. You may be saying all the wrong things. You may be talking about stuff that is nonsense to them. You may be talking about things that don't matter to them at all, right? Maybe you're talking about sports, they couldn't care less. Maybe you're talking about TV shows, they couldn't care less. Maybe you're talking about your family, they couldn't care less, right? So this is, again, just because there's conversation happening doesn't mean that the conversation is meaningful or important to them. So I wrote 3 points down that I wanted to cover as just dangers and the importance of today's episodes. And then I have three applicable things that you can try to apply to your sessions in order to do it. So number one, first note I wrote is we are not the star of the show. Okay. So when we go into a session, remember that people, individuals, are the star of their own show. They are the main character in their life. And so what matters most to them is them, just like what matters more to you is you. But when we go into training sessions, sometimes we forget that that person is coming to a training session not for you, but for them and their results and their life and their wants, their needs, their gains. And so you have to remember that your job as a trainer is to always remember that the star is the person that's coming in to train with you. Why? Second point that I wrote down, because we're not the ones paying them, they are the ones paying us. So at the end of the day, you have to remember, right? How do you know who is the star? How do we know who gets to have the conversation the way that they want? The reality is that they are the one paying you for this training service. And part of realizing what we're talking about today is, even though yes, they're paying for the training, they're also paying for a good experience. They're also paying for you to care for them, for you to be involved in their life, for you to care about what they care about. And so when we forget the dynamic that we have with this individual, we forget that they are the ones investing in this experience, right? And again, they may be investing in it because they really need a coach, but if your coach, all they do is talk about things that they don't care about, or not talk at all, or show no interest in what they're talking about, or have just no connection, or even worse, have an adversarial relationship, then you may be losing the client, even though, yes, they're paying for a service. What I want you guys to remember is they're also paying for the experience that that service is kind of like coupled with, right? You may be the best trainer, but if you train, in the desert with no water, with no towels, right? You may be the best trainer, but you're giving someone the a bad experience, right? Or if you're the best trainer, but you don't clean yourself up, you don't wash your clothes, you don't brush your teeth, right? Like, these are also things that are part of the experience that may be something that is flawed in the experience. So remember, they're not just paying for the training, they're paying for the entire experience. And part of that, as it relates to today's topic, is remembering that they are the one paying, they are the star of the show. And so when it comes to the conversation that we're having with those people, it's about what matters to them. And we're going to get into points on how to get into that, right? The last thing is, like I said just a little while ago, third point before we begin, is that if you don't carry this conversation well, you may actually be doing yourself harm. What that means is you may be saying all the wrong things. You may be talking about all the wrong things. You may be actually even creating an enemy out of this individual based on what you're saying, right? Let's say you're talking about religious stuff. Let's say you're talking about political stuff. Let's say you're talking about current events. Let's say you're talking about a sports team. But what if that sports team is not the sports team that they support, or it's actually the opposite of what they support? Right now, it sounds kind of funny, but some people may be that passionate about their sports team that they may not want to work with someone who supports the opposite sports team, right? So how do you prevent from saying something like that and getting on the wrong side? And you can apply it to everything else that we talked about. Maybe you're working with someone who is an avid reader and all you do is talk about TV shows. That person is not having a good experience, and maybe they actually have judgment on people that watch TV because they are readers, or the reverse. Maybe they love TV shows and all you want to do is talk about books. They're going to feel a certain way about that. So, and the topics go on and on. That's why I figured we should stop and talk about this today, because it is a topic of conversation that trainers should have. That, like I always say, we don't talk about these things in personal training, right? We talk about the squats, we talk about the lunges. What about the conversations that we're having during the session, right? We're working out, but you're not working out the entire time. There are breaks and there are conversations that need to be had. And so how do we carry those, right? So those are just points that I wanted to make, right? We're going to, before we get into it, right? Number one, remember that they're the star. Number two, remember that they're the one paying you for the experience. And number three, remember that if you say the wrong things, you might actually create an enemy out of that person. And all of those things lead to that person not continuing the service. Now, again, you can apply this to the very first time you meet someone, or even after they signed up and they start training with you, right? Because sometimes they're excited when they start and then their excitement fades and we wonder why. Sometimes, again, there's so many things to cover, you guys, but sometimes it could be the conversations that you're having. So if you've ever had an awkward silence, or if you ever don't know what you to talk about, or even if you have had a streak of losing clients that you thought you were getting along with, right? This is a very good point. If you're a trainer who thought you were getting along with your client, you had a great relationship with them, and they quit training, or they asked for a refund, they asked to switch trainers, or they didn't continue their training, they just stopped showing up, that this right here may also be a sign, right? You may think that you're getting along with them when in reality, you're not getting along with them, right? Because sometimes it's the conversation, it's not the training. It could be the training, but today's topic is about this element of your training, the conversation that you're having with them and the importance of it, and how you manage it, even when you don't actually have something to talk about with everyone. Okay. So I just condensed it to three simple things that you can do. There's a lot of different ways to handle this, you guys. There's many levels to it, but I figured if you're having this issue and you've never really thought about it, or if you find yourself not knowing what to talk about, or not getting along or not matching with that person, or losing clients that you thought you got along with, all of those are signs that today's topic may be important for you to listen up and pay attention to. Okay. So number one thing that we're going to talk about, number one applicable concept that you can talk that we're going to talk about today that you need to really consider when you talk to someone. We're going to bring back something that I've talked about in the past, and that is the 80-20 principle, right? The rule of 80-20. That stands for 80%, 20%. Okay? So you can apply this many different ways in life, but the number one way to apply the 80-20 principle when you're with your clients, and this applies to all your clients, even the ones that you already think you get along with, even the ones you already talk well with, and the ones that you don't, obviously. You need right now to really assess how much of the time they are talking versus how much of the time you are talking. And I don't mean the entire session. I mean, the moment someone's talking, let's say you had a timer, and every time they finish a set, every time there's a conversation going on, time it. And you have a timer for how long you talk, and you have a timer for how long they talk. The timer for how long you speak should always be 20%, and their timer should always read 80%. That's the 80% rule. If you want to keep your clients longer, if you want your clients to feel comfortable in a session, if you want to have better conversations with people in this dynamic, simply start to begin to pay attention to the 80-20 principle, right? Because you may be 50-50 right now, which sounds fair, but remember what I said when we started, they're the star, they're the ones paying, right? So that's why this is not a 50-50, because this isn't an exchange that is just happening with your friends or your family. This is also a transactional experience, right? So they are paying to come in. So 50-50 is not good enough. Now, the worst thing is that sometimes we're actually 80-20 in the reverse, where if I was to look at that timer about who spoke longer, I would end up noticing, and you would notice, that you actually are the one talking 80% of the time, and they are only talking 20% of the time, right? Now, that is actually leading to a lot of people not signing up with you or not continuing training with you, because now you have turned the show all about you. And now they're paying to listen to you and your subjects and your problems and your adventures. And that's not a fair and equal trade of money for time and services. All of that has to be counted into it. So simply, even if you don't know what to talk about, even if you don't have a lot to talk about, or a lot of things in common, whether you do or whether you don't, the 80-20 principle needs to apply to all of your clients if you want to have better sales, if you want to have better retention. People feel better when they're the ones sharing about them, and your clients probably have a lot to share about them. Now, again, some people are a little bit more quiet, right? So I'm not saying this is a chatty conversation all the time. Some people are very chatty, some people are a little bit more quiet. But even in that, If they don't talk very much, that means that you also can't be talking very much, right? Because if they only like to talk 10% of the session, you can't then come in and make up for the other 10. And now it's 90-10, where you're spending 90% of the time talking and they spend 10 because they're not very talkative. What you need to do is match the consistency of the conversation. If they don't talk a lot, then maybe you need to slow down and challenge yourself to talk even less than that, right? Maybe you keep it very technical, you keep it about the session, right? That's another thing that I don't think I wrote down, but some people are not there to have a conversation. You have to be mindful of that. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but you have to be mindful of how people are behaving and if they're here to really have a conversation. Some people are not going to talk because they're here only for the service, only for the training session. And you need to pick up on that, right? If they're not giving you a lot, then you don't need to counter that by just filling in the void with more conversation. What you need to do is realize that maybe they're just here for the fitness. So then just speak to them about fitness concepts and explanations and use the conversation time to speak to that individual about what's important to them, which is the fitness part and not the personal part. Right. But again, it's all about that 80-20 and making sure that they are the star of the show. They are the most important person in that session. And it's not just through your training, it's also through your paying attention to what they say and caring about what they say. Okay, Sam, but some people aren't really, it's not flowing. I don't know what they care about. I don't know what to talk about. Perfect. This is the easiest thing you can do. And again, we haven't talked about this book in a few sessions, but How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've already had my staff read it. I've read it. I've asked you guys to read it. Some of you guys have read it. You need to make sure you're applying that stuff. If you would have read it and applied it, today's episode wouldn't even make sense. But the problem is we're not really applying what that book and others like it, what they're actually asking you to do. What books like that are asking you to do when it comes to relationships with other people, sales books as well, they all follow the same exact formula. This is not just about conversations, you guys. This is about sales. This is about relationships. This is about being a better communicator. How do you do all that? 80-20, but we're going to talk about what is it that we're actually talking about now, right? Number one, when you don't have something in common with someone, you should ask about what they care about, right? Instead of turning around and being quiet or turning around and trying to prove your points or give your opinions or give your suggestions or talk about what's important to you, very simply ask about what they care about. Now, that is a skill. It's difficult to develop. That's why I always tell you guys, what have I said during consultations, during your videos, during your sessions, during everything? Ask questions, right? When you meet someone, you have to ask, what's your goal? Why is that goal important? How long have you been wanting that goal? How long has it been since you lost that amount of weight? Is there anything that's in the way of that? How's your nutrition? How's your sleep? How's your medication? What's your background? What's your health history with your family, right? Questions. Questions, 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 questions. It's the only way I'm going to know what's going on. So in your conversation with people, it's the same thing. Questions, questions, questions. Somebody likes to golf. You've never golfed. Maybe you want to ask them about golf. You say, oh, actually, that's something that I've never done or understood. So how long have you been golfing? What got you into golf? What do you enjoy about it the most? What's the hardest thing about it? How does it actually work? Have you ever had a golfing instructor? Would you like to add golf-like movements to your training sessions? Who's your favorite golfer? Do you have a favorite course, right? Do you have a favorite brand? Look at that. I just came up with like whatever, 6, 7 different topics that we can dive into. And if I bring it up, it's going to cause that person to start to share. And it might lead us to a different conversation where we do have something in common, right? If I ask them about their favorite brand, they might say, oh, this is my favorite brand. And you might say, you know what? I love that brand too. Do they both make the golfing and the athletic wear? They do. Actually, yeah. You know what? I met, and then they might say, you know what? The very first time I went, I met the founder of this company. Boom. But now they're talking about whatever is important to them, right? It's not a perfect formula. It's not a perfect science here, but you need to understand the concept. The concept is that when you don't have something in common with someone, instead of just avoiding it instead of trying to find something else that you have in common, instead of just shutting down and being quiet, instead of just talking more about fitness, or the worst thing you can do, instead of talking more about yourself, ask them about the things that matter to them. Just be curious, right? Because when you're curious, what are you doing? You're still making them the star of the show. You're still emphasizing that they matter to this session, right? Instead of talking about what matters to me, I'm going to say, you like golf. Let me ask about that. Oh, you like this sport. Let me ask about that. Oh, you like this sports team. Instead of telling you the one that's my favorite, because again, now we start grabbing that attention again, right? I want to be the one talking. You just ask about what their sports team is, where they're from, how long they've been a fan, what's their favorite, game, what's their favorite player, how many games they've been to, are they going this season, do they have friends that are from the same area, whatever. Ask about them and everything that's important to them. And now the conversation's easier because you've got them going on what matters to them, right? It just happened to me yesterday. I was having a conversation with one of our trainers at the gym, Brittany. Shout out to Brittany. And she hit on a topic. So in the beginning, we were very like 50-50 going back and forth. And I felt bad because I know the rule. I realized this later. She hit on a topic that I was very passionate about. And then I went 80-20. Maybe I went 90-10 for a few minutes where I was just going on. I was talking, talking, talking. She was just quietly listening to me, but she found a topic that mattered to me. And then for the next, whatever, 15-20 minutes, I was talking most of the time. She just would add a couple things. She would, yeah, agree. And then when it was over, I was like, oh, she got me, not on purpose, but like she got me talking about what mattered to me. Right. So you guys want to find the thing that person wants to talk about. Now, I know, again, that's why I had to say they are the star of the show, because what's so difficult is avoiding you putting yourself into the conversation every time. That's really the challenge here. As a concept, it makes sense, right? As an idea, it makes sense. If right now you guys understand that perfect, yeah, it makes sense. If they talk more, they're going to be happy, right? It makes sense. It's easy. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is not showing you guys the 80-20 principle. It's not telling you to ask more questions, to be curious about them, to make them the star of the show. That's not the hard part. The hard part is when it comes time for you to ask a question and then listen to what they say. Are you capable of actually paying attention, or are you just going to do half of it? Whereas you're going to ask them a question, but then you're not actually listening, right? Because you're going to have to ask follow-up questions based on what they say. That's what you're really looking for. You don't want to go in there and ask them about a sports team and then go back to quiet and figure out what else to talk about. Once they get going, if you're listening, if you're paying attention, all you have to do is ask a question about the next thing that they brought up. So they'll let you know which way the conversation goes, right? Let's say you ask them about their sports team, and then they talk about their family or their dad or their mom that was a sports fan too of that team. Well, now you can ask about the parents. You can shift it, right? You can keep going into sports, or you can say, "Oh yeah, how were your parents, by the way? Like, what other things that what other things that they get you into, right? Was there any other teams, any other sports, any other, major important things that they were into?" And they might say, "Oh, my mom, she was a teacher and blah 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 blah, and it made me passionate about education." Boom. Now you have more things that are important to that individual based on the answer that they gave. So you can't just ask and then zone out. You have to ask in order to find a new topic, and then ask again, and boom. And before you know it, you are more conversational, right? That's the part that we don't learn. Part of conversation is understanding that you let the other person talk about the things that matter to them. Again, in this scenario that is transactional, in this scenario where they are the ones paying for the service, where they're the ones that are the star of the show, right? Because you're not working out more than they're working out, right? Why would you do that? Do you think about this? Do you take more time to work out yourself during their session? The answer is no, right? You probably don't work out at all. Why not? Because it's about them. Because you're watching their form. because you're instructing their exercises, because you're the one making the adjustments. Okay, the conversation is the same thing. Why aren't you talking? Why am I asking you to talk less? Because you're paying attention, because you're watching, because you're adjusting, because you're making adaptations, right? You're watching in real time. Do I need to pull back? Do I need to move forward? So just like you're watching the session, just like you don't interrupt their session to get your exercise in because they're the star of the show, they're the one that paid. In the same way, your conversation has to follow the same rules. You don't jump in and say, "Hey, why don't you wait for me 5 minutes while I get my push-ups in?" They always say, "This isn't about you. This isn't about your results." Exactly. So the conversation is the same thing. The conversation isn't about you either. Again, of course, you're going to have your points. You're going to have your opinions. You're going to chat. I've had conversations with clients where sometimes I am talking for 50% of the time because we're laughing, we're having fun. But you still have to remember to tie it back, right? Like even yesterday, I did the wrong thing, in my opinion, by going on and talking about this thing because Brittany got me going. But I was able to reflect and go, I can't keep doing that. I can't fall into the trap of not involving the other person in the conversation as well. So when you know the rule, you catch yourself, right? Brittany, she's listening to this. Sorry about that, but she was kind enough to listen and to kind of let me keep going, right? And I felt like we had a good conversation, except for a while, I had actually begun to talk more. Now, before that, it was a great conversation about a lot of different things, but I just realized I fell for the trap. So, how does this apply to you? Why am I even sharing the story? Because you're going to fall into the trap. They're going to hit on a subject that you do want to talk about, and now you might end up flipping the whole conversation, but the conversation is not about you. So that's why I'm harping on this so much. Just like you wouldn't stop and get your own workout in, you don't want to stop and get your own conversation, your own points in. Of course, it flows back and forth. So in a conversation, you are going to agree. Maybe if they like a sports team, you tell them about your sports team. They talk about how they got into it. You talk about how you got into it. They talk about the games they've been to. You talk about the games you've been to. But this is the rule. Once you've made your point, you got to throw it back to them because, again, the 80-20 principle still applies. 20% of the time is my response, right? I let them tell me about their family, blah, blah, blah. And then I agree. Oh, yeah, my dad got me into these sports too. We every summer we go to these games and we're always having fun, da, 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 blah, 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 blah. And then I throw it back. What games do you like to attend or do you prefer to watch it at a bar? And then they go, they go, they go, they go. Cool. And then now I've flipped it back to 80-20. But the how do you apply 80-20? You guys be curious about them, make them the star of the show. Remember that they're paying you, you're not paying them for this session. And remember that you wouldn't stop and do your own workout in the middle of their session. So you're not going to stop and have your own points and conversations in the middle of their session. Very critical, you guys. You might not even realize you're making this mistake. You might not realize you're making this mistake because you're not paying attention to your conversations and you may be struggling. Now, if you can learn to do this with the clients you already have, here is something that you can look forward to. It's going to make you way better at your sales. So the more with the clients that you already have, if you can start applying this with the clients you already have, the moment that the gym gives you a lead, you're going to know how to take care of it because boom, you're going to turn it right around and be all about them. So what are your goals? Why are these goals important? Your questions are going to come a lot easier because you're used to asking questions. You're used to giving them that service, giving them that attention, right? Paying attention to what matters to them and digging deeper to get to know them more. So 80-20 is the first thing that you need to apply in your sessions. And the beauty of that is that eventually you're going to find some common ground because we're all people, we're all human, and you're going to find certain things that you build a relationship around, right? So if it's sports, if it's shows, then whatever that interest is, now you're going to talk about the ones you like, the ones they like, but it's kind of around the same subject matter that's important to them, right? But again, the only way you find that is if you keep asking questions. I'll tell you guys a story of someone that I worked with for a while. It took a couple of months and we had some conversations, and then we both realized that we liked certain like conspiracies and aliens and things like that. And because I hadn't gotten to that point, I finally like brought it up, and then boom, client completely changed, the conversations changed, the vibe changed because now we had realized, oh, we're both kind of weird and nerdy in this subject matter, right? I had no idea, and I'd worked with her for a couple of months, right? So that's the power of digging and asking questions. You find something, boom, now you have something in common. And sometimes it might be the weirdest thing, like what does a mother of two and I have in common? Well, it turns out, alien podcasts and stuff like that. So, and obviously she was more into it than I was, but I had some awareness and knowledge of it enough that the conversation was able to be had, and the relationship was able, like there was bonding around that subject matter, right? So, boom, there you go. Number two tip that I have for you guys after the 80-20 principle, after asking them and keeping the conversation about themselves, listen to what they have to say. Something that I have applied in my life. It started with the clients, but I've actually ended up applying it to just my everyday life. And that is, when you hear that somebody's into something, this is what I do. I investigate. So number two is investigate, investigate, investigate. Let's say somebody brings up a show that you've never seen and they're really into it and they start telling you about that show. They're going to say, "Oh man, it's so crazy because, it's this detective, and the detective, he doesn't know what's going on, and then there's this guy, he's chasing the detective." And they're telling you, you're like, "I don't know what this is about." Okay, investigate. When the session is over, make a note on your phone somewhere about the show that they like. You don't have to watch the show, but at least watch an episode or two to kind of understand what they're talking about, right? Or maybe you realize there's one that's similar that you like and you guys can kind of bond over that, right? But investigating, giving people, again, because again, they're the star of the show. And I'm just telling you what I adapted, okay? I started in my career to try to dig deeper into the things that my clients cared about. So if they cared about a certain sports team, maybe I would write down that they're playing tonight, and maybe I just turn on the second half and I would watch the second half of the show. And even if I didn't follow it, I would at least come back and say, "Oh yeah, I saw the game last night," or just check the score before they came in, right? And I could bring that up. "Oh, I saw that they won. I saw that they lost, man, whatever," right? I have something to talk about, something to show them that I found interest, because listen, check this out. Even when you don't maybe care for it too much, showing that you had an interest in it, showing that you went as far as to look into the show that they watch, into the podcast that they listen to, into the sports team that they follow, whatever it is, showing that you looked into it a little bit is going to change the way that they look at you, even if you end up talking about other things into the future, because maybe you don't bond over that. Even if you don't bond over that, showing them that you cared enough about them that you went home and you watched one game, you went home and you watched one episode, you went home and you listened to one song, you listened to one podcast, right? You read one of the books or one of the authors that are their favorite, whatever it is, right? Their favorite food. Maybe they talk about this restaurant that they like, or this burger place, or whatever. Make it in your notes. I'm going to check that out over the weekend, right? I'm going to get lunch anyway. I might as well go check out this place that they love. When you come back, now you've created a bonding that wasn't there before, and you just had to listen, investigate, and then take action. So that's something that I started applying with my clients, and it made me have better connections, right? And also, this is the beauty of it. It made me more versatile, right? It made me more aware of more things, right? The more that I studied the things that they cared about, the more I realized a lot of people are into a lot of different things. So it made me less just judgmental, right? It made me more aware of how humans are. It made me aware of how different we are, and it made me aware of how similar we are. So I learned a lot based on what my clients were telling me they were into, and investigating, going one step further and caring about what they cared about, at least enough to let them know, "Hey, I tried. Maybe I still don't like it, but I cared enough about you to give it a shot." And I have taken that even outside of my training job, and it has helped me out in just my everyday life. If I meet someone, they're into something, if I care enough about it, then they're going to feel like I appreciate them. And what's funny is sometimes I have realized I'm actually into the things that they're into, right? They show me a band, they show me a show, they show me, a podcast. And I'm like, you know what? This is actually pretty cool. I would have never found it if it wasn't for them. So, again, like I said, not only has it worked as a relationship and bonding strategy, it has also worked in a helping me grow as a person and be more aware, right? Be more well rounded as an individual because you know a little bit more about more things, right? And what happens is it compounds over time. And so now when I meet someone else of that age, when I meet someone else of that culture, when I meet someone else from that state, when I meet someone else who's a fan of that same show or sports team, oh, guess what? Now I actually got a little bit more ammunition because I'm not starting from zero. So this is a strategy that's going to compound over time and you're just going to be more and more versatile, right? But you can't just sit in your own little bubble and just talk about the things that you care about and never expand beyond them. I mean, you could, but you're going to be stuck training 10, 20, 30% of the people that you could have, right? Only 30% of the people that train with you are actually going to stay with you. 30% of the people that you show that you pitch on a sales pitch, only 30% are going to sign up with you. Why? Because you're allowing yourself to be limited instead of expanding and finding something to connect with different people. That's why I said when you start mastering this, not only does it make you a better trainer, it helps your career be solidified because they stick with you. And also, it just organically will make you a better salesperson, even without the sales strategies, simply because you're putting that person first. You're making them the star of the show. You're asking questions. You're digging deeper. You're curious about them. You're letting them talk 80% of the time and you're investigating and caring about the things that they care about. Now you're going to start to create a better relationship with that individual instead of just talking about yourself or allowing it to just be awkward silence. This is not going to be fail proof. Listen, even as I say it, I think about some people that like they were just a little bit maybe awkward around other people. Different people have different conversational styles. Some people are not that conversational. So it's not to say that it'll work with everyone. Some people are just going to be a little bit quiet, but even then, some of the same rules can still apply. Still make it about what they care about. Still make sure that you're not talking more than they talk. Still investigate the things that they care about. And you know what? You may bring a little bit more out of them. Even the more shy people, or maybe the more introverted people, or people that just don't like other people, right? Maybe they're training with you and they don't really care about people. They just need to get in better health, right? So they're not here to talk. Even those people, you may be able to pull something out of them if you care about them and you make them number one. The last thing, and I put it last because it's my least favorite thing, but it is something that you guys need to be mindful of. Okay. And a lot of people use this in sales. Again, this is an old school sales strategy, but it does apply to a certain degree when you are talking to people. And it's called mirroring. Okay. Mirroring like a mirror, right? You see your reflection. So mirroring is simply studying the person's mannerisms, studying the person's posture, their cadence, right? Whatever makes them them, right? Are they somebody who sits still, somebody who moves, somebody who talks fast, somebody who talks slow, right? Somebody who moves their hands a lot, maybe somebody who leans back a lot, right? What are their mannerisms? What is their cadence? Do they talk fast? Do they talk slow? Right? What's their vocabulary? Little things like that. Mirroring means that you are paying attention to their way of expressing themselves to the world. Like I said, there's many little different factors, right? It's the way they talk, the way they walk, the way they dress, all of these little things, right? You can keep going. Mirroring means that you try to match their movements, match their cadence, match their vocabulary, right? Match their vibe in a certain way. And so that's what mirroring is, right? Again, I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't think it's the best thing to do in the sense of like building a relationship because you're not really paying attention to the person. You're paying attention to kind of like their exterior, right? How they move, how they walk. You're not really listening to what they say. You're listening to how they say it, right? You're not just listening, but you're watching how they walk, right? Like, so it can be a little too much, right? So I'm going to say, like, be careful of this, but it is important for you to know this for one very important reason. And the reason is you also don't want to be too mismatched. What that means is if that person is not very talkative, if they like to move slow, if they like to talk about certain things, what you don't want to do is end up being the exact opposite of that, right? So I'm not saying copy who they are, but be mindful of their personalities, be mindful of their vibes, be mindful of their cadence, be mindful of their energy, right? Be mindful of who they are because you don't want to come in and do the opposite, right? This has happened to me. I've taken classes from individuals where there's nothing wrong with the instruction except I came in and I was very friendly and jolly and smiley and I shook hands and they were very like quiet and down and slow and not as engaging, right? So immediately I felt the mismatch because I walk in and I'm like, "Oh, hey, good morning. How's it going?" And I, "Oh, hey, oh man, we're mismatched here. We haven't even started talking. We haven't even started working out, training, whatever it is that I'm doing with that individual. We haven't even started, and we're already mismatched. We're already mismatched because they're not paying attention that I'm in a good mood, right? And the reverse is true. Maybe someone's in a down move and you come in and you give them a big old high five and you're like, oh, just, hey, pick up that head up and like stay positive, right? There's nothing wrong with being positive and trying to encourage a client that's not feeling the best, but you kind of want to start and meet them where they're at. So for me, mirroring is just that. You have to be mindful of what that person is putting out there. You have to be mindful of, are they listening to you? Or are they just putting up with you, right? Have you picked up on that? Um, are they actually engaged in this conversation or are they just tolerating this conversation? If you paid attention to their mannerisms, if you paid attention to what they say, what they do, how they move, do they look at you? Do they look away? Do they take as many breaks as possible to get away from you? Right? Watch their body language and it's going to tell you a lot. Right. So that's the only reason why I threw mirroring in there. It's only because I want you to at least be aware of the vibe, the energy, the cadence that that individual presents themselves with so that you can judge yourself against their vibe, right? And so are you talking fast to someone who likes to talk slow? Are you speaking too softly to somebody that's hard of hearing? Right? That may be an issue. So if you're not paying attention to how that person experiences the world, how they move through the world, how they speak to the world, how they listen, how they behave, what's important to them, what they care about, what they don't care about, if you're not paying attention to that person, then you're going to mismatch yourself, right? The reflection that you give back to them is going to be completely different and opposite of who they are and what they like, right? Because there's nothing wrong with being different, but you don't want to be so different in areas that make them uncomfortable, right? So again, this is a tricky one, but I figured, what is like what's wrong with adding this in the sense that like it would be good for you guys to be aware of this, right? And originally this was a sales strategy that was used where if the person crosses their arms and you cross their arms, if they lean back then you lean back, right? And it was just kind of a way, it was like this psychology thing. Now I don't know if it was proven to work. That's why I don't really care for it. Also, people can catch on to you being fake if you're being too weird like that, you have to be yourself. So for me, it's more about an energy, a vibe, a cadence than it is just mirroring how somebody moves. You want to be an individual. You have to always remember who you are and be yourself. But at the end of the day, you also have to be mindful of that other individual. Again, they are the star of the show. They're the ones paying for this, or they're the ones that might sign up with you. So at the end of the day, you have to find ways to be adaptable and make sure that you're figuring out where they are in their energy, in their vibe, in their cadence, right? In their thought process, their behavior. You have to be mindful of that. You can't just live in a world where you're only paying attention to you, right? Like maybe there's somebody that likes to look at the person they're talking to and you're someone who looks away, right? They're going to feel like you're not really listening to them because what they respect is a conversation where two people look at each other, right? Or if somebody's on their phone and the other person's not when we're talking, the mirroring there is important, right? You have to respect this person does not have their phone out when I talk to them. I should not have my phone out when I talk to them. This person looks at me in the eyes when they talk to me. I should look at them in the eyes when they talk to me. This person makes sure that they're respectful when they introduce themselves. I should make sure that I'm respectful when I introduce myself. This person likes to high five after every set. I should make sure that I'm high fiving them after every set, right? Like you have to figure it out. The one thing I'll say is you never want to mirror or match negativity, okay? Because even negative people, and this will be my last little point here, even negative people don't like other negative people, right? Now they may not like positive people, but they won't tolerate negative people, right? And a lot of negative people don't realize that they're negative. They're only going to see when you're negative. They're not going to see that they were negative first. So my point is always like, if somebody's really negative, then you don't want to fall into negativity with them. If they like to speak ill of other people, you don't want to join them in speaking ill of other people, because they can't see their negativity, but they will see it in you, right? They'll see, oh, you're somebody who talks about other people. You probably talk about me. Other clients may hear it, right? They may say something to another client. So you never, never, never go into a negative speech, negative ideas, negative topics with people. Don't let them pull you down. Um, Negative people are not as many, but every once in a while you will. And what I'll say is that's someone that, you probably don't want them to sign up. I had to learn this the hard way over many years, right? When I started, I wanted to sign everybody up. But after a while, I realized, the negative people, they can just go, because it's just a matter of time before they ruin your day. It's just a matter of time before they say something to one of your clients. It's just a matter of time before they say something to another trainer. It's just a matter of time before they blame you for something. It's just a matter of time. So with those people, I have learned, if somebody's negative, their speech is negative, their attitude is negative, stay positive. And if you don't vibe, it's better that they go, and not you trying to manipulate the situation to where you keep them around. They will always end up doing something to harm you, whether it's asking for their money back, whether it's changing up their schedule, talking bad about you, talking bad about other trainers, talking bad about other clients, talking bad about the gym. They will bring some negativity into your life. I had just found that. So I just figured I'd add that from experience. But that is, you know, communicating with your clients. Just some things that I had thought about um, earlier today, on just this situation that we find ourselves with, trying to connect with individuals. If you guys follow the 80/20, if you guys investigate, and if you match their vibes a little bit, and be mindful of how they operate, if you do all those things, you're going to start connecting with people of all sorts of types. The number one thing is to make it about them and not about you, okay? Because you're going to meet people from different backgrounds, different beliefs. The last thing you want to do is interject your beliefs before you figure out what their beliefs are. So if we follow 80/20, you're less likely to say the wrong thing, because instead of giving your opinion when they say they follow this religion, instead of you filling in with what you think about religion, you simply ask them more about their faith. You don't have to agree. I never said you had to agree in any of these topics. I never said you had to convert or agree or think that they're right. That's not the point. The point is, before I say anything, I need to let them be the star of the show. And if they follow a certain faith, a certain political party, whatever it is, the best thing you can do is be curious about it. Nobody's asking you to have an opinion on it. Just be curious about it. Try to find the positive things in it, even if you disagree, right? Or this is the beauty of following this system, you guys. If they bring something up that you don't agree with, it's not your point to make a point, but it is up to you now to talk about other things. Let's say you realize, oh, this topic is not a good topic for us to talk about. I don't know anything, or I actually believe the complete opposite. Okay, then now you just keep asking questions until you have gathered your little like categories of things that you guys bond over. But you would have never gotten there if the first thing that you do is interrupt with your beliefs, right? That's the importance of following this, right? Be in like the 80/20 that we talked about earlier. The importance is to gather information so you know where to dig deeper, where to avoid, where to investigate, and so on. And that's how you build better relationships. So you can be great friends with someone who has a different belief in one area, but actually you guys agree on four other areas, whether it's sports or shows or books or lifestyle or marriage or family or no family or whatever. But until you've gathered the data You cannot jump in and start talking. That's why 80-20 was the first point and the biggest point that we made today. 80-20 allows you to let them keep talking and for you to remember, hey, don't say anything yet. Don't say anything yet. You're not sure yet about where this is going. So keep them going, keep them going. Once you figure it out, now you can say, okay, let's expand on that. Let's investigate on that. Let's agree with that, or let's avoid that. But you're in control when you allow that person to share more with you and apply that 80-20 principle. And they're just going to be happier all around because not only did they get a great workout, you told them about the session, but they felt like, man, my trainer really like was into what I was talking about. Right. And then you take it one step further and you investigate and you come back and say, oh man, yeah, that podcast you were talking about was pretty interesting. You know, I listened to this episode and I thought this was interesting because this happened to me once. And boom, now you have something else to relate to them with, but you have to make it about them. Okay? You are the chameleon. You are the adaptive person. It's your job because you're the one that wants to build a personal training career. You're the one that wants to get clients. You're the one that wants to keep clients. You're the one that wants to make a paycheck. So if you want all those things, then listen and pay attention and apply to the things that we talked about in today's episode. All right, you guys, thank you for hanging out. I'm starting to sweat. It's getting hot. I got to get my workout in. And yeah, send in your questions. So next episode, we'll answer one of your questions. We got some really good ones sent in recently. So I've been wanting to get into those. So we're going to answer some of your questions in the next episodes. But, you know, if you guys have your own question, make sure you send in your questions. Give me some details about, you know, like where you're coming from, exactly what you're trying to figure out, right? I've had a couple of questions where I'm like, I'm not exactly sure what the question is here. So make sure that you ask exactly what you're trying to figure out, where you're coming from, and we'll answer your questions. So you can go to personaltrainerhustle.com and you can do that. And then the other thing we've added is just some marketing tools for you to use. One being that you can have a personal training logo shirt that you can wear around. It's a conversation starter. People say, hey, you're a personal trainer. They're going to ask you questions, and you can start conversations with people at the grocery store, at the post office, wherever you go. If you have it on, people are going to say, okay, I know what you do. Maybe I want to ask you a question, right? So it's always a good tool. So that's on personaltrainerhustle.com/shop. And there's a couple other cool things I've added on there, but that's there for you guys. Whoever wants to grab that for themselves, you can do that. But if not, send in a question. And if not, keep listening to the PT Hustle, follow the PT Hustle, review the PT Hustle, only if it's 5 stars. If it's not, you know, be kind and move on. All right. So anyway, I'm just joking with you guys. I appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate you guys supporting what we're doing here with the Personal Trainer Hustle. It is always awesome to see that you guys are paying attention. You guys are applying it. You guys are trying to build your careers. You're trying to be better trainers, better salespeople, better, you know, business people. I love it. So we're going to keep it going. As long as you guys keep listening, as long as you guys keep sending in questions and supporting the show, then we're going to keep it going. And we're always going to find something to talk about that helps your career move forward. And today was about conversations we have with our clients, as I see that this is an important thing to cover. So send in your questions, pick up a shirt, support the show, have fun, be safe, stay positive. I'm whatever, dude. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.